everybody, and welcome back to another 10 plus 5 rapid game. Today we are going to be playing another game in our speed run. And in our last game, we decided we were going to play group spell defense against D4. Excellent opening. You can attack your opponents when they try to play very defensively, additionally with D4. So today I'm hoping we get another epic game. Another game where we are able to show tactics, able to learn something. And that's what chess is all about. That's what Chess Strategist channel is all about, learning chess and together. So I'd say let's just get right into it. And recently I've been trying out different styles of content. It's been pretty interesting learning different styles of everything. Second. And today I'm going to play e4. And our opponent goes for 5, and we're going to go for f3. And we got d6, the Philidor defense. Philidor defense is a very passive opening. Doesn't really contend for an advantage, just begs for equality, and we're going to break that open by playing d5. And our opponent goes for this bishop to g4. And we are going to take in the center, take on e5. Here I've actually learned. And here we can actually drop our queen like this, back on this pawn. And it's pretty difficult to defend these kind of positions here. They're going to create this weakness, and we can play our bishop forward immediately, creating more threats for our opponent to respond to. And we're getting very rapid development here. Our knight's going to come out to c3. Bishop's going to come out. And we're going to just be in a very powerful position. We can always play this move bishop e4, not e4, sorry, bishop d5, creating an attack on the rook, where our opponent's going to have to play this move d6. They can't really develop their knight to c6. And their development is very hindered here. We're going to have a lot of that. Okay, and our opponent develops their queen. And, yeah, I would say that's kind of a poor move for a few different. First of all, they're not really addressing threats. One thing we can do is put our bishop here and make a threat on the queen. He's going to have to just play c6. I don't think he wants to do a pretty poor move, I would say. Okay, and we can drop back our bishop here. Now we notice his knight has nowhere to develop. I'm noticing our knight might be better even on d2 than on c4. We're going to go with knight d2 first, before we do anything else. Our opponent drops pawn further, and we're going to just drop our bishop back to d3, creating more stronghold, more defense on this pawn in the center. Notice this pawn, again, is now becoming a weakness. We're going to have our knight jumping out to c3. We're going to have our bishop coming out to 5 likely. And yeah, this is going to become a very unpleasant position very quickly for our opponent. Right, we're going to make a threat on the pawn in the center that has to be defended. Over. We're creating dual threats on the pawn in the center. that. Notice he's gonna try to pin our queen. Defending that right now. You just want to keep mindfulness about that square. Can be a weakness. Okay, and our opponent decides that he wants to advance a pawn there, but we can move our queen, attack the pawn in the center. On here. Our opponent does. Here we've won a pawn in the center of the board, and we're creating an attack on this pawn. Knight is because of that. And we're going to get very nice development here. I'm thinking f4 is one of our next moves as well. Preparing to our knight some way and then play 5 up the diagonal for bishop. Right, we're going to move our knight with tempo here. Threatening the bishop. Draw back. Right, and I'm offering a trade. Here I'm noticing that if we trade this dark square bishop, we are going to be able to win pawn a little bit better. This one here. Be a lot easier, I would say. Here we're going to start advancing our pawns in the center of the board. First thing we're going to do is play f4. Noticing this e4 pawn's a weakness, we want to play e5. That's why we're playing f4. f4 first, defend, and play e5. Opponent's taking their time. And this position can become very complicated very quickly. I've noticed take here and they want to create an attack. That's fine. Now notice if we do move this bishop, there will be an attack on this pawn that we cannot defend. So feels like we have to play this e5 move here. Create an attack on this knight. And if he takes here, we are going to be able to. Okay, so he decided to attack this pawn, and we're going to get a pawn chain 3. Again, if he takes here, we're going to have another pawn in the center that we can use to break through. So I'm not really worried about this trade. I think it's honestly favorable for us. Also opens up the c2 square that we can use for our knight to attack this pawn. Also opening up the c file for our rook. Like, there's so many different reasons why this move is not that threatening to me. Alright, our opponent has decided to play move I would say is pretty wise. Decided to castle. And we can castle to the same side of the board or the opposite side. I'm thinking probably the opposite side of the board is better. Notice what we've done to this knight. We've pretty much just restricted it from. Has no squares to jump to at all. It's also covered by this pawn, and we just want to trade off some pieces now. Our advantage a little. We're gonna castle, and we're gonna offer this full trade of pieces. Trade rooks. We'll trade bishop for knight. We'll trade any of it. We just want to get pieces off the board here. I'm seeing an excellent square for this knight to end up on, and that square is lovely e3 square. Not e3, sorry, d6. I don't know why I said e3. Our knight's on e3. We wanted to get it to d6. So first thing we're going to do is jump our knight forward here. We start to occupy this amazing square. My opponent's decided he wants to play g6 and knight to g7. I guess that could be good. Nice f5 square. But again, any of his knight moves, we're going to be able to advance our pawns. Tempo. So I'm really not worried about the long plan that he has. Our plan is a little simple. Takes less time. More effective. That's not always the case. Sometimes the long plan does better than short plans. But if we can get our knight to an excellent square and he has to take all these moves just to get his knight to an okay square, have a better position. Alright, I think our opponent is discovering, hey, I'm having a desperate kind of position here. I really have to start making some moves. Answer my cause, and he decided to not let us into that deadly square, which I think is a wise move, in my opinion. That square is way too strong for us. It give us kind of a dominance over the position, not be able to back. And I'm liking this idea here of deploying our bishop onto the long diagonal and offering the rook trade as well. We want him to trade rooks on our terms here. We don't want allow him to trade favorably. We're never going to take like this and allow him to have the file. We're just going to allow him to take us, and if we take back and he plays his rook over, we can just trade all the rooks off the board. Excellent. Here we're going to play our rook over. Alright, and our opponent has decided to defend the pawn with his king. Fair move. And we have a few different ideas here. What I like is just jumping our knight into the center here. Now that we have our rook able to jump in, we're going to be able to create a threat on this pawn. He's going to have to defend that pawn somehow. Main idea of this position is trading as many pieces as possible. Why is that? Well, I'm noticing that whatever combination of pieces we trade, as long as they're equal trades, it's going to be this bishop versus this knight. And which would you rather have? The knight that has nowhere to go, or the bishop that's controlling the full long diagonal with no contesting? I mean, it's pretty simple to me which one is better. And here our opponent, I think, is he's decided to attack our bishop, but we can just drop it back. I could drop it back even all the way here. Still creating pressure on this pawn. Our knight is now uncontested. Our knight is also threatening to capture here. Our bishop is still spying the pawn. And our opponent really has no threats. So, winning of pawn on f7 is very trivial. I think him playing f6 would probably be one of the better moves. Trading off our strong e5 pawn, which is devastating. And our bishop also may develop to h3. h3 is a nice square for our bishop because our rook may be able to evade eventually along right here. Now notice the knight is defending that square temporarily. That won't always be the case. Okay, so he's defended square with his rook. And have here. What's the best move? Well, I'd like to invade with my rook. I think his knight is on a decent square right now. Maybe we can knock his knight away somehow. Also, we threaten to invade with rook. So I'm going to offer a knight trade again. See what our opponent wants to do. Also, this move kind of encourages f6, even though it is still possible. It's a move that I don't want to allow him to play on a good version. Rather him have to give up something for it or force a piece trade. So an extra eye on the f6 square is always nice. So I'm thinking this knight to e4 move is an excellent one. Super important right now is challenging our opponent, asking them questions, and forcing them to come up with the right answer. That's an important concept. You want to ask your opponent questions when they have a weak position. Force them to come up with the right answer. Here we also have this idea of going knight to g5, threatening this pawn here. And there's not that many good ways to defend a lot of... He's got a lot of weak pawns. Got a lot of questions. Ask him, hey, defend this, can you defend that? And eventually our opponent's going to be stretched way too thin. Something's going to fall. Our opponent's choosing tank on the clock instead of quickly. I think that's the power of the bishop rolling higher diagonal for eternity. And these knights, this one's pretty good, but this one's just out of the game. Now, phrase in chess. I don't think I've mentioned it in videos, but it's very popular, especially as coaches. The phrase is a knight on the rim is or a knight on the rim. And here we can see that in full effect. This knight on the right here are going best. So this knight d5 idea, this can be gone for any opponent, but I feel like our knight may be able to one on this 7 square. It's not really a nice square. Not create. I think creating some luff for our king or getting our king into a little bit more might be a good idea. About this move. Is there a way we can attack this pawn immediately? Yeah, we can lift our rook. Let's lift our rook. Let's lift our rook attacking this pawn. Force our opponent to respond. There's a few different ways that they can respond. They can play their pawn forward like this. Giving up another square in the center here. And we're just asking our opponent questions. The question is, how are you going to defend? Or you can also play a5. Another interesting. This is what we have to do all game. Hey, opponent, can you do this? Can you do that? And notice it takes a lot of time to come up with the right response in a lot of these positions. These positions are not easy. And now the secondary part of our plan is we lift our rook over like this. And once our opponent plays b4, the c4 square is permanently given up. We're going to be able to create an attack on this pawn here. It's going to be devastating for our knight. So we can move our knight to g5, and now not only are we creating an attack on h7, we're also creating an attack on c6 that's going to be stop. So this is a very positional kind of endgame. We're creating pressure, forcing his pieces to respond, and then creating more pressure on a different side of the board, trying to stretch him too thin. And the weak pawns are the targets. Weak pawns are the targets, and the pieces are the defenders. Notice when one of your pieces is out of position, you don't have enough time to correct it, suffering. And the piece that we're talking about, of course, this bad knight has nowhere to go. Hasn't played f6 yet because of I don't know why. He needs to be playing f6 at some point. When he has a tempo or we're not creating a threat immediately, able to play that move, trade off our knights. Again, my knight is much better than his. So he's got 2 minutes left on the clock. Let's see what he. All right, and he does drop his knight back. And here I think he's really losing a lot. That is not a great move for a few different reasons. The first one is I feel like we play this move here, knight to f6, blockading the f6 square, allowing him from playing f6. Knight may be able to redeploy, but we are threatening h6 or h7, and we also are threatening to win this pawn immediately. The devastating attack on a whole host of pieces. Um, I'm not even sure which is better. Advancing our rook, that nasty check that forces him to the back rank, or um, taking with the bishop and allowing us to deliver a nasty discover check. All right, there's a lot of things we can do here. I'm seeing going with the bishop is probably just, I mean, sure. Going with the rook is also quite nice. But I'm going to go with rook because I don't want to allow this move here. Creating a double attack in any version. Rook staying on this square would be check. Force our opponent to the back rank. His two squares here. Squares are gate. And on the d8. Notice the e3 square is covered by both knights. We want to jump our rook over here. Creating an attack on this knight. Knight moves are going to be nasty square that will hopefully allow us to material. Starting pawns are incredibly weak. Pressure them with the rook. We can right, and here our opponent has blood knight. Step our rook back. Forward. Back like this. Offer the rook trade. If you want for it, he can. If you fine. Trade. Now I want to make sure don't lose the game dumbly by allowing him to give us a checkmate like this. So let's be very careful in this. Block the file. Yes. Let's make sure we block the file correctly though. First thing we're going to do is give this rook check where our opponent goes. And notice if we took like this, he would be bad. Kind of bad. I think see how much our opponent can options first. Nice. Not going to be a checkmate here. Not enough pieces. Now we are threatening. Take this pawn here. Whole lot of pawns on the side, or sorry, side. And as you can see, endgame, we've been up a piece of pawns for a while now, but these endgames can become very complicated very quick. Our opponents do find great resources times. We have to respond accurately to our advantage. Here we're going to and our endgame advantage has not been tricky and struggle from the whole time. Well, we've got our rook behind this pawn, and it's going to be pretty trivial from here. The winning rook endgame, we have so many extra pawns. Our opponent really doesn't have much of anything. Not care about him winning pawn. We're going to keep advancing our pawns. Advance this pawn. We're going to create a queen. And we're going to create another queen. And we're going to check like this. This. Opponent's trying to hang on here. I'd say the fastest ways for us to win include this. Because he has lots of pawn moves. Not worried about stalemate here. On the move. Here, I'm sorry, he has no king. But he's gonna have king move eventually, and yeah, as long as he has one move to play. So as soon as we move our queen like this, have king moves. Like this. Like here, checkmate. This and white victorious. Black has resigned. All right, I will get to the analysis in a second. I will cut the clip and I'll be right back. All right, so let's get started with this analysis. I feel like this is going to be an interesting one to go over, see our mistakes. The game started with a Petrov's defense. Or sorry, not Petrov's defense, my bad. Philidor defense. Now, Philidor defense, the main move here is d4, and we played the main moves, challenging the center of our opponent. And they went for this kind of common line at the beginning, beginner level, bishop d4. Bishop g4 has a few footfalls because you can get a strong advantage with white, and we decided to play a pretty critical line. And here, actually, the move is bishop d4, immediately creating the checkmate threat, and then sliding your queen over. That probably would have been better, but what I ended up going for was pretty similar. Starting with queen to b3, creating the double attack. Then we forced our opponent to play this b3 move, developed our bishop. And then after that, opponent developed their queen. And I think this is a poor square for the queen to develop. mainly just because of the inability for the knight to develop once they have to play c6. We force him to play c6, drop our bishop back, so we lose a tempo, but we've encouraged a weakening move. And here we develop, and I've noticed our knight is kind of better on d2, and for very subtle reasons. First of all, there's a tactic in the position that exists if you play knight to c3. And it's kind of similar to the Noah's Ark trap, if you guys have ever seen it. Noah's Ark trap involves c5 usually. Here we've got b5, interesting move 4 that would really create some problems. Now, granted, this move here saves us, but I didn't want to allow anything like this where this pawn gets advanced and these pawns are just coming and attacking us very quickly, giving our opponent something to play for. I didn't like this at all. So I thought the knight on c3 was probably not that good. And so I decided to develop it to d where it's defending, and I could also deploy to f3. Gonna be a nice square. Opponent decided to encourage our bishop to go back, which is fine with me. Creating this e4 pawn as a stronghold in our position. And we develop our knight, develop our queen. Notice our queen really wasn't doing anything on this square. I wasn't creating any threats. There's no threat on this pawn anymore either. So the queen on c3 is creating an attack on this weak pawn in the center, and we notice our opponent just doesn't see it. We get the free pawn, and now we have pretty close to a winning position. Our opponent wants to trade bishop knight. We drop our knight back center. Notice this knight becomes a very active piece. Squares. Bishop develops. Play f4. He trades, and we get our pawns in the center. And by establishing these strong pawns in the center, really knock this knight out to the side of the board permanently. It really just has no way back in. The only way back in is breaking with f6. And this should have been what our opponent does. Breaks with f6. Any of these positions. Even here, f6 is fine. And if we take, then he's allowed to get the knight back into the game where it can deploy a whole host of positions. I think d5 is a nice square. I think if he's able to secure 4, it's a nice square. And if we don't take, say we just castle, he's taking, and we've got an isolated pawn, and he can play to attack this isolated pawn. So there's a lot of different ways he could have played this, but he decides to castle. We castle as well. And castles. Both castles long, and he decides he wants to redeploy his knight like this. And I think that was his initial idea, but he decided to shy away from it. It requires very precise follow-up for him to capitalize on this. And we notice, we notice our plan is a little bit faster. Using the c4 square to get to 6. This is where we want to end up on. And our opponent says, no thanks. We have to take our tempo to stop you. And that's good. We're making aggressive moves. They're making defensive moves. That knight was much better on c5 than it is on b7. So develop our bishop to a more active square, offering the rooks, and we trade rooks. Get our knight to the center. Notice we can win on in a lot of these positions, or we can win even this pawn, especially in a lot of these positions. We just decide to keep pressuring. So pressure this pawn, he's forced to respond. Drop our knight back. Say, hey, your knight. You have to move your knight somewhere. What are you gonna do? Defend your knight. You're gonna move it back. Okay, with our rook, saying, hey, how are you gonna defend this pawn? He defends it with a5. Our rook over, saying, hey, we're gonna give a discovered attack on this pawn. So every move we're making is a threat on one of the pawns in his, forcing him to make a weakening move or make his piece defend, which make them more passive, less likely to be attacking us. So in this whole game, we're not worried about him attacking us because pieces are placed. Knight does finally go to g7. Our knight goes to f6, preventing this f6 break that we were actually concerned about. We're also attacking h7. We're also attacking this pawn. And we're able to create a strong attack that our opponent's unable to respond to. So here we just pieces develop simply, make sure we don't get checkmated, and we win the game. So anyways, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. See ya.